This had to end right away. That's what the woman from the neighborhood association told me, not long after I moved into what was supposed to be my peaceful dream home by the lake. My name's Kyler, and you're not going to believe what unfolded in just the first half hour. No polite knock, no greeting. She barged straight into my home and declared that I had no right to use the lake. But what she didn't realize, she had no clue who I really was. By the time this story's over, she's going to regret ever underestimating me, because sometimes the quiet guy next door isn't someone you want to push around, especially when he owns a lot more than you think. Ever had a nightmare with a neighborhood association? Drop your stories in the comments. I bet I'm not the only one. Now, let's get into it. Just 30 minutes into my first day at the lake house, I already found myself in a situation no one would believe. I'd spent years dreaming about this exact place at the peaceful lakeside setting, the serenity, but everything got flipped upside down fast. It was a crisp Tuesday in October when I finally stood inside my newly purchased lakefront home, watching the moving truck disappear down the road. After 2 decades working in tech, I had finally secured the perfect retirement spot on Clearwater Lake. This place wasn't just a house, it looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. A wooden deck reaching out over glassy water, morning mist drifting above the surface, and not a sound except the occasional call of a loon. After endless Zoom meetings and debugging sessions, this was supposed to be my escape, my moment of peace. The movers had just wrapped up and I stood there, coffee in hand, finally feeling like I might have cracked the code on work-life balance. But then a doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors. Honestly, I didn't want visitors. The timing was too perfect, like someone had been watching and waiting for just the right moment to interrupt my solitude. I opened the door to find a woman in her 50s, standing with the kind of presence that made it feel like she ran the entire neighborhood. She looked at me with cold, rehearsed authority, the kind of expression you don't just wake up with. Before I could say a single word, she walked right past me and into my house. No exaggeration, she just walked in like she owned the place, heading straight to the sliding door that overlooked the lake. I stood there dumbfounded, wondering if I'd missed some strange local tradition. But before I could figure it out, she turned to face me and said the first words of our conversation. "This has to stop immediately." I looked around my empty living room, trying to make sense of what needed to stop. I had literally been there for less than an hour. "Excuse me?" I asked, because what else do you say when a total stranger just walks into your home and starts laying down ultimatums? She pointed at the lake through the glass. "You can't just show up here and start using our lake," she said. "This isn't a vacation rental for out-of-towners." Her dismissive tone toward my property rights was beyond frustrating, it was infuriating. Lake access was clearly outlined in the deed. I even grabbed the paperwork from the kitchen counter, fresh from the lawyer's office, and started to show her. She waved her hand at me like I was showing her a grocery list. "I don't care what that old paper says," she snapped. "Old paper? We were talking about legal ownership documents, not a to-do list." Then she reached into a slim folder and pulled out a pre-printed document titled Voluntary Lake Access Relinquishment Agreement. She slapped it down on the counter and declared, "You're signing this today. It's for the good of the community, safety and property values." I had to read it twice to believe it. This woman was trying to get me to sign away a core feature of my property, something I had paid for, as if it were nothing. "The last 3 people in your house signed it without a fuss," she said, tapping her pen against the agreement. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just about me. How many others had been pressured into giving up what was rightfully theirs? I asked her some pointed questions, but she brushed them off with vague phrases. "Drama-nest business," she said. But the look in her eyes told me there was more going on. I stayed polite and explained that I'd need to review the association's rules and possibly speak to my lawyer before signing anything. You'd think I told her I was suing the neighborhood. Her expression darkened instantly. "You have 24 hours, she barked. "After that, we'll have to begin daily safety inspections, possible violation notices, special fees." Then she leaned in close, voice low and icy. "Life gets very complicated for people who don't cooperate with Drama-nest." And just like that, she turned and slammed the front door so hard it made the windows shake. As soon as she left, I grabbed my phone and called my business partner, "Ryan, you won't believe what just happened," I told him. He was already laughing. He knows I somehow always attract the strangest situations. While I was telling him about this outrageous encounter, something caught my eye. Sitting near the door was a box, still unopened from the move. On top of it, a business card had slipped out. A Thompson Rodriguez Marina Development, and there was my name, co-owner. I stared at that card and realized that this woman had absolutely no clue who she was dealing with. See, here's the thing about quiet people. There's usually a reason we stay quiet. Often, it's because we're too busy building something meaningful to waste our time talking. This property wasn't just a place to unwind. It had been chosen with strategy, a business strategy. And Janet, yeah, that was her name, Janet Hutchinson, president of Anadroma Nest. She was about to learn the hard way that messing with me wasn't the same as hassling a typical homeowner. That night, I dove into public records like a detective. Every deed, every Anadroma Nest meeting transcript, I combed through it all. 20 years in tech taught me how to break down complex systems and identify patterns. And let me tell you, there were patterns all over this so-called neighborhood association. I spent the night doing what I do best, investigating. What I uncovered chilled me to the bone. Initially, there were 4 homes on our street that came with direct lake access, clearly written into their deeds. These weren't just homes, they were premium purchases, made by families who paid extra specifically for those rights. But when I reviewed the most recent public records, I noticed something strange. 3 of those 4 families had voluntarily given up their lake access in the past 3 years. Sound like a coincidence? It gets worse. All 3 surrenders happened shortly after what the Anadroma Nest meeting notes described as compliance issues on their properties. The more I examined the timeline, the more suspicious it became, and the deeper I went, the clearer the picture got. Janet had taken over as president of Anadroma Nest precisely 3 years ago. And in those same 3 years, families were methodically stripped of their lake rights. In fact, every single surrender had taken place during her time in charge. She had been in power for 3 years and 2 months, to be exact. Now, I don't usually jump to conclusions. I've spent 20 years working with data, and I know how to separate signal from noise. But when a pattern lines up this perfectly, it stops looking like coincidence and starts screaming conspiracy. The violations listed in Anadroma Nest records, vague things like non-compliant landscaping or unapproved outdoor storage, stuff that could apply to almost anyone, depending on how strictly you interpret it. But what stood out the most was how fast these families moved from receiving those notices to giving up their lake access. We're not talking months, we're talking weeks. That's not normal homeowner behavior. That's what people do when they're being pushed to the edge. The pattern was undeniable. Janet had a system. She wasn't just using scare tactics. She'd created a blueprint for taking away people's property rights under the guise of rule enforcement. The following morning, I was outside reviewing the boundary lines on my property when I heard a soft, kind voice call out, "You must be the new neighbor." I turned to see a petite older woman making her way over from the house next door. She looked to be about 79 or 80, with a voice like warm tea but eyes that were sharp and watchful. "I'm Mrs. Clark," she said. "Been living here for 26 years. 26 years. That meant she'd witnessed everything the Anadroma Nest had done, every leadership change, every quiet takeover. As we chatted, I casually mentioned that Janet had dropped by the day before, and just like that, the air seemed to cool around us. Mrs. Clark's expression changed in an instant. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, glancing around nervously as if someone might be eavesdropping. "You need to be very careful with that woman." Her tone wasn't just cautious, it was the kind of tone you'd use when warning someone about a predator, not a neighbor. She began telling me about the families who used to own the other lake access homes, the Millers, the Parkers, and the Williams family. She counted them out slowly, thoughtfully, on her fingers. "All wonderful people," she said. "All had kids who grew up by that lake, laughed, swam, fished. That lake was part of their lives." You could tell from her voice that she truly cared for them. But then her tone shifted. A sadness crept in as she described what happened. Janet did the same thing to each of them, one violation after another, daily warnings, constant pressure, legal threats, extra fees, until eventually, they just gave in. She shared more details about the Williams family. They had 3 children who had fished from their dock since they were in diapers, but after Janet made their lives unbearable, they gave up and moved out of state, just to escape her reach. I stood there, stunned. Who does this to families over access to a lake? But Mrs. Clark wasn't finished. She's not just cruel, she said softly, she's methodical. Everything she does looks officially neat, clean, legal, but underneath, she's tearing families apart. What she was saying only confirmed what the documents and timelines already pointed to. Janet wasn't simply being a difficult neighbor, she was strategically targeting people, isolating them, and pressuring them until they surrendered. By Thursday morning, her campaign against me had officially kicked off. First notice, improper storage of moving materials, a $50 fine. The materials? 3 cardboard boxes stacked neatly on my porch. I hadn't even had time to break them down yet. Day 2, unauthorized dock usage inspection, $100 fee. The irony? I hadn't even stepped onto the dock, let alone used it. Day 3, landscaping violation, another $75 charge. The lawn hadn't changed since the day I arrived. At this point, it was obvious either this woman was completely out of touch with reality, or she was executing a finely tuned harassment strategy. Based on what Mrs. Clark had told me, I was betting on the latter. $225 in penalties in 3 days, for nothing. And I had a strong feeling this was just her opening act. The speed, the aggression, the laser focus. It was clear Janet had honed these intimidation tactics over years of targeting other families. Each notice was crafted to apply maximum pressure, emotionally and financially, while keeping up the appearance of official procedure. So, I did what anyone with sense would do. I started preparing for war. That very afternoon, I installed security cameras. I photographed every violation letter with timestamps. I started logging every single interaction, documenting everything, every detail. What my attorney uncovered left no doubt this was deeper than neighborhood politics. Linda, my lawyer, took one glance at the so-called violations Janet had issued and flat out said they were complete nonsense. According to her, none of the things Janet accused me of were actually listed in the Anadromast rules or guidelines. Not a single one. But that wasn't the end of it. Linda also mentioned 2 other families who were currently being worn down by Janet's relentless pressure. One couple, she said, was seriously thinking about selling their home just to get away from the harassment. That hit me hard. This wasn't just about me, or even about lake access. Janet was actively dismantling people's lives for reasons I still hadn't fully uncovered. That's when I dug even deeper into public records, and that's where the real twist came in. I found documents connected to a company called Clearwater Development Partners. Turns out, this company had bought lake access rights from 3 properties in our neighborhood, the same ones that had voluntarily surrendered their access. Each sale, exactly $25,000. 3 families, 3 sales, $75,000 total for rights they'd already paid for when they first bought their homes. The listed owner of Clearwater Development Partners, a man named Marcus Williams, a guy in the Marina development business. I stared at the documents in disbelief. This wasn't just some power-hungry HOA president throwing her weight around. This was starting to look like a calculated, well-organized scheme to strip families of their property rights and flip them for profit. That Thursday afternoon, I decided to follow Janet after she left for one of her Anadromast errands. She drove to a small, tucked-away coffee shop about 15 minutes from our community and met a sharply dressed man I instantly pegged as a businessman. I couldn't hear their conversation, but the body language said everything: animated discussion, serious expressions, papers spread across the table, broken bar, and finally, Janet walking away with an envelope in her hand. I managed to catch a partial plate number on the man's vehicle, a quick trace. It linked directly to Marcus Williams Development LLC, the same Marcus Williams behind the lake access buyouts. Sitting there in my car, watching that exchange unfold, the truth hit me all at once. This wasn't random bullying, it was a well-oiled scheme. Janet wasn't just harassing homeowners because she liked control. She was systematically pressuring families into surrendering valuable assets so her partner could swoop in and buy them up at bargain prices. 3 families hadn't just lost lake access, they'd been outright robbed. Their property values dropped, their kids lost access to the water they grew up around, and all the while, someone else cashed in on what they had rightfully owned. And Janet, she was profiting off the destruction she caused. I called Ryan to update him. As the phone rang, I found myself wrestling with a decision. Do I go public now and shut this down quickly, or let Janet keep playing her game while I gather even more evidence? Part of me wanted to strike fast, but another part knew that patience might lead to a bigger takedown, a one that couldn't be brushed off or spun. What I did know for sure was this: whatever it took, this corruption had to be stopped. But the real question was, would waiting let her hurt another family before I could put an end to it? That same evening, Janet scheduled a last-minute emergency Drama-nest meeting for 7 p.m. A classic power move. Schedule it at a time that's nearly impossible for working families to attend, and stack the room with retirees and loyal followers. When I arrived at the community center, I counted about 21 residents already seated, most of them older folks who looked at me like I was the threat. Clearly, Janet had been working the rumor mill overtime. I could hear the whispers: troublemaker, problem homeowner, doesn't follow the rules. She'd painted me as the villain before I'd even had a chance to speak. But I wasn't alone. I walked in with Linda, my attorney, and a thick folder of carefully documented evidence. And when Janet saw me with legal backup, her confidence wavered just for a second, but I saw it. Maybe she was starting to realize this wouldn't be another one of her easy wins. She opened the meeting with a full-on slideshow about lake safety and community values. It had everything: photos of overcrowded lakes, charts on liability risks, and graphs about declining property values. If you didn't know better, it looked official, polished, persuasive, professional. She clicked through slide after slide, warning about the dangers of unregulated lake use. This is about protecting the future of our community, she said, sounding like she was presenting to investors instead of neighbors. The way she spoke, you'd think I was planning to launch a party boat business off my dock. But I recognized at least 3 of her photos. They weren't even from our lake. 2 were from a state park in Wisconsin, another was from a vacation resort website in Florida. Did she really think no one would notice? Or maybe she just counted on her audience not checking facts, assuming they'd trust her word blindly, as they likely had for years. When it was finally my turn to speak, I didn't get dramatic. I stuck to the facts. I showed my deed, my legal property documents, the ones that clearly I presented the paperwork showing that lake access was legally included in the purchase of my home. Linda turned to the room and clarified, Mr. Thompson's deed clearly states that lake access is part of his property. The Drama-nest has no authority to strip him of rights that are legally bound to his ownership. Simple, right? But Janet didn't miss a beat. She cut in, claiming, community safety overrides personal desires. We have to protect the greater good. Personal desires? As if I was making some selfish demand. These weren't wants, they were rights I paid for. But Janet kept spinning it like I was trying to bend the rules for my own benefit. It was maddening. She acted like raising her voice could erase my deed. All it really did was show how threatened she felt by the truth. Then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Clark, a 79-year-old woman I'd hardly spoken to before, stood up. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but as she spoke, it grew stronger. It was one of the most powerful things I've ever seen. She looked Janet dead in the eye and said, Janet, you did the same thing to the Miller's Broken Bar and the Parkhurst Broken Bar and the Williams family. Suddenly, the entire room went still. You could hear the air shift. You hit them with phony violations, constant threats, broken bar, until they gave up and left, she continued, her voice gaining force. You told us they were disruptive, but they weren't. They were just families who wanted to enjoy the lake access they paid for. I looked around and saw the mood changing fast. Faces softened, memories sparked. It was like people were realizing they'd been fed a false version of events for years. The atmosphere split. One side was nodding, clearly recalling the families Mrs. Clark mentioned. One man said, I remember the Williams kids. They just loved fishing. They never caused trouble. But Janet wasn't completely abandoned. A few still stood by her. Janet's kept our property values stable for years. one woman argued. We should trust her judgment. The tension was thick, and I realized this was her game. Pit neighbors against one another, divide, confuse, and conquer. That's how she kept control. But it was slipping. Janet's frustration bubbled over. Her voice cracked as she shouted, "This is exactly the kind of division these troublemakers create." Troublemakers. There it was again. She turned toward me, pointed, and snapped, "I don't care who you think you are. The rules apply to everyone. Who I think I am." That was my cue. I stepped forward calmly and said, "Janet, before you go on with the threats, there's something you should probably know." Silence. "I'm Kyler Thompson, co-founder of Thompson Rodriguez Marina Group. We partner with lakeside communities all across the region." I saw it at a flicker of fear in her eyes. For the first time, her smugness faded. "My business partner, Ryan Rodriguez, runs the largest marina consulting firm across 3 states. We've been working on a major development for this lake for 2 years. Janet's face dropped. She didn't expect that. Her response? She doubled down, yelling, "I don't care who you are. The rules are the same for everyone." Rules, right. The same rules she made up whenever it suited her agenda. "This community won't be intimidated," she declared. But there was a noticeable crack in her voice when she said intimidated. The irony was almost laughable. Intimidation had been her #1 tactic for 3 years straight. She tried to sound tough. "We'll see what the courts say about your so-called business ties," she spat. Courts? She'd been the one operating in the shadows all along. Honestly, I almost pitied her. Almost. The meeting wrapped up without a final decision, but one thing was crystal clear: the tide had turned. I had momentum now, and she knew it. You could feel it in the whispers around the room. People were starting to question what they'd accepted for far too long. Maybe Janet's leadership wasn't as beneficial as they once believed. She rushed out quickly, but not before shooting me a look, a mix of pure hatred, a broken bar, and real fear. Mrs. Clark came up to me quietly and squeezed my arm. "Be careful, dear," she said gently. When Janet feels cornered, she turns dangerous. Dangerous? What was she going to do? Send me another stack of phony violation letters? Mrs. Clark's expression said more than words. It was clear to me now there were layers to Janet's actions that I hadn't uncovered yet. What had she really done to those other families who stood up to her? As she walked out, it hit me. I had just gone head-to-head with someone who'd spent 7 years mastering the art of community manipulation. She knew every shady move, every legal gray area, every way to wear people down until they just gave up and left. And now, she was going to throw all that experience at me. But what she didn't count on was that I wasn't alone. I had assets, influence, and a business partner about to arrive who could shut her entire scheme down once and for all. The only question was I prepared for the fight ahead? Tuesday morning, I sat on my deck, coffee in hand, when a sleek black Tesla pulled into my driveway. Out stepped Ryan Rodriguez, a polished, confident, and instantly in command of any space he walked into. At 43, he had a presence that couldn't be ignored. We've been business partners for 8 years now. I handled the engineering and operations of our marina projects. Ryan managed the deals, development, and politics. Between us, we'd revitalized waterfront communities in 6 regions, always focused on responsible growth and shared benefit. He took one glance at my lake access and smiled. "Kyler, this spot's ideal for what we've got planned." Word spread quickly. By midday, it seemed like everyone in town had heard the marina guy had arrived. Some were intrigued, others anxious, probably wondering if their home values were about to soar or sink. Ryan suggested we gather the community right away. "Let's cut through the gossip," he said. He was right. No doubt, Janet had already been working overtime telling people we were here to destroy their peaceful little town. We walked into the meeting and felt the weight of eyes on us, a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Ryan didn't waste a second. He launched into the presentation, calm and direct. "For 2 years, Kyler and I have been designing an environmentally responsible marina project tailored to this community," he began. Then came the visuals, architectural renderings, ecological assessments, and sustainability plans. He continued, "This project is built to protect the lake while bringing economic opportunity. It's not just development, it's investment in your future." The presentation showed a marina built with native plants, solar technology, and thoughtful boat launch designed to preserve the lake's health. Property values and similar projects we'd done had risen by 30 to 40%. Plus, the project would bring in around 60 stable jobs, with flexible roles for students and retirees. As people took it all in, I could sense the shift. Skepticism was giving way to interest. This wasn't some cheap, careless build. It was a chance to uplift the whole community. I added something that had been on my heart. You know, I've told stories like this before about places that thought they were facing disaster, only to realize they'd found their greatest chance at growth. Ryan nodded and picked it up from there. But I noticed people sitting a little straighter now. They were starting to believe we weren't here just for business. We wanted to build something lasting. Then Ryan's tone shifted, a firm, serious and the energy in the room tensed. Unfortunately, he said, lifting a thick binder, someone has been actively working to undermine this project before it even began. He flipped it open. Mrs. Hutchinson has been collaborating with a competing developer, accepting payments to pressure homeowners into surrendering their lake access rights. A stunned silence filled the room. She's been selling off those rights families already paid for to Marcus Williams Development a broken bar for $25,000 apiece. I looked over at Janet. Her face went pale as Ryan unveiled the evidence: emails, text messages, bank transfers. Every detail laid bare. She looked like someone watching her empire collapse brick by brick. Then Ryan held up side-by-side images. On one side, Marcus Williams proposed to build a high-density, budget marina with little regard for the environment and maybe a dozen low-wage jobs. On the other, our plan: dozens of solid jobs, strong eco-safeguards, and a marina designed to enhance, not exploit, the community. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. She was willing to exchange your community's future for personal profit, Ryan said, locking eyes with Janet. The crowd erupted. Shocked questions, raised voices, accusations flying. She's been lying to us the whole time? She told us your marina would ruin our homes. The fury was overwhelming, and honestly, completely earned. These folks had trusted her to look out for them. Instead, she was selling them out, one family at a time. Mrs. Clark stood up again, her voice trembling with raw anger. Janet, you destroyed 3 families for cash, she said. You forced children to leave their schools, leave their friends just so you could make a deal behind our backs. I had never witnessed a 79-year-old woman so full of rage. But truthfully, Mrs. Clark had every reason to feel that way. Janet tried to backpedal, insisting that her actions were all part of trying to protect the community and that she had been exploring various options for the best outcome. But when residents started demanding a look at the bank records Ryan had brought, the truth could no longer be hidden. Janet's denial was weak. I never accepted any payments, she said, her voice cracking. But Ryan held the receipts, clear, undeniable proof. Transfers of $25,000 here, $10,000 there, all perfectly timed, with each homeowner surrendering their lake access rights. The evidence was overwhelming, and even Janet could see it. My attorney, Linda, stood up and calmly explained that accepting money while acting as HOA president violated her fiduciary responsibilities in a serious way. The room moved quickly. They called for a vote to remove Janet from her position. The result, unanimous. Not a single hand rose in her defense. Watching her go through that very public fall from grace, I won't pretend I didn't feel a small sense of justice. This was the woman who had bullied and cheated families out of their rights, and who had tried to push me out using the same tactics. And now, she stood there stripped of her authority, her lies exposed. I was only trying to do what I thought was right, she mumbled. But Mrs. Clark cut in sharply. No, Janet, you were doing what was right for your bank account. After that, Janet gathered her papers in silence and walked out of the meeting without a word. I watched as her car rolled away, likely for the final time. Did she even grasp the extent of what she'd just lost? Right after her departure, the community took a vote and our marina development project was officially approved. The energy in the room shifted instantly. People were thrilled. They saw the job opportunities, the increase in property value, the environmental benefits. Everything we had promised finally made sense to them. For the next hour, I shook more hands than I could count. Neighbors who were once suspicious now greeted me with genuine enthusiasm. It was incredible how quickly opinions changed once the truth came out. Still, as I watched Janet vanish down the road, I thought back to how all of this started. One determined woman trying to scare one quiet homeowner. Now she had lost everything: her control, her standing, her elaborate scheme. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the last we'd hear of her. People like Janet rarely disappear quietly. The justice system didn't waste time. Within a week, the county's HOA Oversight Board launched a full investigation into her actions, and they meant business. Janet was hit with financial penalties, including a $2,400 fine specific to our community. On top of that, she was ordered to pay $4,800 in legal costs for the families she had targeted. But the worst blow wasn't financial. She was barred from serving on any HOA board for 5 years, effectively ending her reign for good. And the developer who had been secretly paying her off, they abandoned her instantly. In fact, they threatened to sue her for breaching their contract. Her real estate license was also under ethics review, and between you and me, I doubt she'll ever work in that field again. The Millers, Parkers, and Williams families are the ones who had suffered the most. Filed lawsuits for harassment and fraud. Linda, my attorney, represented them. She made it clear, Janet's campaign wasn't random, it was calculated. She intentionally inflicted financial and emotional harm on these families, all for her personal gain. The Williams family's case, in particular, hit home for me. They had been forced to move with 3 young kids, kids who had to leave behind their school, friends, and everything familiar, just because Janet wanted to make a profit off their access rights. Imagine being driven out of your home, not by some disaster, but by lies and harassment. Wouldn't you want the person responsible to be held accountable? Finally, that's what was happening. Janet was facing real consequences for every family she manipulated, every life she disrupted. But something even more powerful was unfolding now: the transformation of our community. It was as if a heavy, invisible weight had been lifted off the neighborhood. Overnight, things felt lighter. People started chatting again across fences, smiling more, cooperating instead of clashing. Our home meetings, once filled with tension, turned into productive discussions about real improvements. Within just a few weeks, we voted in an entirely new board, one that promised full transparency. Meetings were recorded, major decisions required community approval, and no violation notice could go out without the agreement of at least 3 board members. No more one-person rule, no more unchecked power. I reluctantly stepped into the role of treasurer. After everything that had happened, I felt a responsibility to make sure our money was managed with integrity and openness. Once we had full community support and environmental approval from the county, the Marina project took off at full speed. We held regular town updates, and the sense of shared excitement was unmistakable. People were already buzzing about the Marina shop. The anticipation surrounding our community's new boat launch in the lakeside park created a buzz long before any ground was broken. Local teams were already submitting applications for summer jobs, while contractors competed for various phases of the construction. Even in its early stages, the project had already started to bring value to the neighborhood. Home prices began climbing almost instantly. Within just a few months, values had surged by an average of 38%. Homes that had lingered on the market were suddenly selling fast. The excitement was real. Mrs. Clark quickly became a bit of a local legend, and she absolutely earned it. The community organized a special gathering to recognize her strength and courage in standing up to Janet when no one else dared to speak. During the event, I told everyone gathered that if it hadn't been for her bravery, Janet might still be bullying families and robbing them of their property rights. Seeing that strong 79-year-old woman finally receive the appreciation she deserved was deeply moving. It reminded us all that confronting wrongdoing is always worth it. She could finally enjoy her garden and her home in peace, without the looming threat of being targeted. The other residents who had been suffering under Janet's constant pressure, their violation notices were thrown out, and any fines they had paid were fully refunded. The look of relief on their faces said it all. It was like they could finally breathe freely again after months of being under siege. When construction kicked off in late spring, It became more than just a building project, it became a neighborhood event. Children played in the safe zones near the site while school was out. Older neighbors watched from their porches, some even offering lemonade to the workers. Everyone felt invested because this project wasn't just for them, it was by them. The local media caught wind of the story, calling it a shining example of how businesses and communities can support each other instead of clashing. The groundbreaking ceremony wasn't just symbolic, it was a celebration of a major victory. We had gone from being a fearful, divided neighborhood under one person's control to a united, energized group with common goals and honest leadership. As for Janet, her exit from the neighborhood was quiet and kind of sad. She put her house up for sale and tried to relocate somewhere far enough away to escape her now tainted reputation, but things didn't go smoothly for her. The rival developer she had been colluding with was now pursuing legal action against her for breach of contract, and her home sat on the market for months. Buyers weren't exactly lining up to purchase from someone with such a disgraceful history. When the property finally sold, it was for a steep loss. Mrs. Clark, who had lived next door to Janet for years, had mixed emotions about the whole thing. One day, as we stood watching the marina take shape, she turned to me and said, "She made her choices. Justice isn't just about consequences, it's about creating something better in the aftermath." And she was right. Janet was held accountable, and that mattered for the people she had hurt, and for the moral backbone of our community. But just as importantly, something better came out of all of it, a stronger, more democratic structure and a beautiful marina development that would benefit everyone for years to come. Sometimes the most powerful way to erase the legacy of a corrupt person is to build something so meaningful that no one even remembers their name. Now, 6 months after everything began, I sit on my dock, sipping coffee and looking out at the nearly half-completed marina. It's progressing ahead of schedule and better than I ever dreamed. The results have been incredible. Local unemployment dropped by 18%, and 3 new small businesses opened in town. Local shops, from the grocery store to the gas station, saw noticeable boosts in business. Mrs. Clark has even started compiling a scrapbook of the entire marina journey. She's included everything from our first conflict with Janet, to the ceremonial groundbreaking, to day-by-day photos of construction progress. When it's finished, we'll display it proudly in the marina office as a reminder of what we achieved together. The dynamic in our neighborhood has completely transformed. Where there was once fear and tension, now there's collaboration and genuine community spirit. Home meetings used to be filled with conflict, now they're productive, with residents offering ideas, volunteering for committees, and working together toward shared goals. The transparency changes we implemented have made a world of difference. Our financial records are published online. Major decisions can't be made without a full community vote, and no one can issue violation notices without agreement from several board members. As the community liaison for the marina, I've found a new sense of purpose in making sure every voice is heard, and that this development continues to reflect the values of the people living here. To be honest, I never imagined my retirement would lead me into something like this. But in many ways, it's been more rewarding than anything I did during my decades in the tech world. The impact of what we've built hasn't gone unnoticed. I've received messages from residents in other neighborhoods, people who are facing the same kind of home abuse we once endured. They tell me they've heard the Anadrama Nest, and they're asking for advice, for hope, for the roadmap to take back control of their communities. People began reaching out, asking how to push back effectively. Janet's situation had unexpectedly led to stronger protections for homeowners at the county level. Across the region, HOA residents were starting to realize that intimidation and bullying tactics now carried serious consequences. Mrs. Clark and I found ourselves acting as informal advisors to other neighborhoods seeking transparency and fairness in their own governance. Sometimes I think back to that first day, when Janet walked in demanding I sign her paper. What if I had just gone along with it? Would I have had the strength to fight back, or would I have chosen the easy road? I'm so glad I stood my ground, because this fight turned out to be about so much more than my own rights. It became a stand for every resident's dignity and security. Thanks to the success of the Clearwater Project, Our marina venture grew beyond anything we'd initially envisioned. We secured 4 new contracts inspired by Clearwater's impact, and we were even featured in Marina Management Today as pioneers in eco-friendly development. Environmental organizations took notice and publicly endorsed our approach, praising it as a balanced model for preserving nature while driving economic growth. Clearwater had become our proud example, a proof that development could uplift communities instead of taking advantage of them. Ryan and I even began working on a book about business development rooted in community values. We decided to donate all proceeds to fund scholarships for local students pursuing environmental engineering and sustainable enterprise. Personally, the transformation I experienced throughout this journey caught me by surprise. I had moved here for a peaceful retirement, never expecting to be thrust into something so meaningful. But life has a way of choosing the battles that matter even if you never saw them coming. Standing up to Janet wasn't just about safeguarding property, it was about affirming that everyday people deserve respect and fairness in their own neighborhoods. My background in technology and business, combined with the strong relationships I'd built here, turned out to be exactly what was needed to shift the direction of our community. Funny how the skills you think you've left behind become the very tools that spark lasting change. And the impact hasn't stopped. It's grown, piece by piece, from the foundation we laid while standing against Janet's corruption. Today, we have a children's lake fishing program run by volunteers who teach water safety and conservation. Mrs. Clark started a shared garden, where she teaches the younger generation how to grow their own food. There's a boating club tailored for our senior citizens, and a scholarship fund for students funded by profits from the marina. What makes these programs so powerful is that they didn't come from the top down. They were born from residents who no longer lived in fear, who had the freedom to take initiative without the threat of retaliation hanging over them. Young people have started to take notice too. They're becoming interested in community planning, business, and local government. That alone gives me hope for the future. The recognition we've received along the way has been gratifying, but more importantly, it's helped amplify awareness about what's possible when people work together. During our groundbreaking celebration, the county awarded us for community excellence. The mayor commended our innovative partnership between business leaders and local residents. Mrs. Clark was named Citizen of the Year for her unwavering courage in taking a stand, an honor she earned 100 times over. But the greatest reward of all is seeing this community flourish and knowing we've created something lasting, something that will enrich lives for generations to come. We're now planning a second phase of development, which will include a conference center. The idea is to provide a place where other communities can visit, learn from our experience, and see firsthand how cooperation and transparency can replace fear and corruption. Still, as I sit here witnessing the steady progress and watching our community thrive, I can't help but think about all the other Janets still out there, the ones still bullying homeowners, still abusing power, still tearing down communities from the inside. Part of me feels like it's time to relax. Our local battle is over, and it ended in triumph, but another part of me wonders, is this just the beginning? Should we be doing more to help others create their own success stories? Mrs. Clark and I talk about this sometimes while watching the marina construction unfold. Maybe our true legacy won't just be the marina, but the message behind it, that ordinary people can rise up, confront corruption, and build something extraordinary in its place. Sometimes it's the neighbor you least expect, the quiet one minding their own business, who turns out to hold the power to reshape an entire community. Exactly 1 year after Janet barged into my home demanding control of my lake access, we hosted the first annual Lake Freedom Celebration. It was a beautiful day. 35 families gathered, including new residents who'd moved here, drawn by the positive energy in the marina project. Children played joyfully on the new lakeside playground. Adults fished peacefully from the accessible dock, the very dock Janet had once tried to claim for herself. There was a shared sense of pride in the air, a deep feeling of accomplishment. The marina was now 60% complete. Most of the boat slips were already pre-leased, and there was a growing wait list of people eager to be part of this thriving new space. And Mrs. Clark, now 80 years old, stood smiling beside me, witnessing the impact of everything we built together. Mrs. Clark, now 80 years old, sat beside me on the dock, watching the sun dip below the lake's horizon. "You got your peaceful retirement after all," she said with a soft smile. "Just not how you expected." I couldn't help but laugh. She was right. "Plus, 62 new jobs and the most stunning marina in the region," I replied. "Sometimes, the best plans are the ones you didn't plan at all." Looking around at what our community has become, it's hard to imagine this was once a place silenced by fear and weighed down by corruption. The turnaround has been remarkable. Property values have surged, and now there's a 6-month wait list for homes here. Local businesses are thriving from the fresh wave of residents and visitors. There's a buzz in the area, one of hope and pride that wasn't there before. But what means the most is the trust we've restored. Neighbors feel empowered to speak up at meetings, to work together, and to voice their concerns without fear of retribution. That shift in spirit, that return of courage and openness, is far more valuable than anything we've gained financially through the marina. Janet never came back after her public unraveling during that infamous community meeting. She sold her house at a 30% loss to a young couple with 2 children, kids who now delight in playing by the lakeside she once tried to claim. The legal system caught up with her, too. She was ordered to pay substantial settlements to the families she wronged, lost her real estate license, and filed for bankruptcy just to handle the judgments. The last I heard, she was working as a grocery store clerk several states away, starting from scratch with nothing but the weight of her own decisions. Some might say that was too harsh a fate, but what would you do if someone tried to ruin your family's life for a personal profit? Mrs. Clark put it best. She made her choices. Now she's living with them. Justice isn't always graceful, but it's necessary. What's amazed me most are the ripple effects that continue from our journey. The county has tightened oversight on HOA boards, and the state is even considering new protections for homeowners, in part because of what happened here. We've received letters from other neighborhoods, inspired by our story, saying they finally found the courage to take a stand. People across the state are realizing that bullies can be stopped, and they often reference Anna Drama Nest as a symbol of that turning point. Mrs. Clark and I have continued our work as informal advisors, helping other communities understand their rights, unite around shared values, and adopt peaceful yet firm strategies for confronting abuse of power. It's become a fulfilling part of our lives, a second career in helping others achieve what we did. We share simple but powerful advice: document everything, learn your legal protections, find allies, think beyond just your own case. These principles are universally effective anywhere ordinary people are facing intimidation or injustice. These tactics give them a path forward. Meanwhile, our marina business has become a leader in sustainable waterfront development. We now have projects in 6 different states, all built on the same community-first model. We've shown that it's possible to succeed in business while genuinely improving lives. The book Ryan and I co-wrote about community-driven business development is now used in university courses. And thanks to the scholarship fund it created, 12 local students are currently pursuing degrees in environmental engineering and sustainable enterprise. But the true proof of our vision isn't in books or bank accounts. It's right here, on this lake. Families now enjoy the very waterfront 3 others were forced to give up. Children are learning to fish from the dock Janet once tried to seize. And no future HOA president would ever dare attempt what she did. The community simply wouldn't allow it. This experience taught me more than I ever expected. Here are a few lessons worth remembering. Understand the systems that shape your life. Bullies rely on people not knowing their rights. In conflict, facts are more powerful than emotion. Keep records, save emails, take photos. You can't win alone. Build alliances with others who share your goals. Stay calm and professional. It always beats anger in the long run. And most importantly, fight for something bigger than yourself. When your goal includes justice for everyone, your impact becomes unstoppable. For me, the real victory wasn't Janet's downfall or even the marina's success. It was watching Mrs. Clark teach kids to fish from the very dock Janet tried to control. It was seeing families return to the lake, families who once felt forced to leave. It was knowing that no future corrupt leader will ever thrive here again because the people have found their voice. Sometimes, the sweetest form of justice isn't tearing someone down, it's building something so meaningful that their harm fades into irrelevance. And that's what we've done here at Clearwater Lake. So, To anyone watching this, anyone facing HOA harassment, unfair property disputes, or corruption in your neighborhood, know this: you're stronger than you think. That quiet neighbor down the street might surprise you with their resolve. That elderly woman may be braver than anyone gives her credit for. That resident being pushed around could turn out to be the one who inspires an entire movement. Don't give up, keep records, rally your community, seek expert help when needed, and always think beyond your own fence line. Ask yourself, how can this battle lead to something better for all of us? That's how you make real, lasting change, not just a short-term victory. As I sit here, gazing across the lake at our nearly finished marina glowing in the evening sun, I hear laughter from families gathered along the shore. Children run freely near the water, and neighbors chat warmly, things that once felt impossible under Janet's regime. Even Janet's former home tells a story of transformation, now adorned with a swing set, bikes in the driveway, a small garden, and a front door mat that finally says welcome and means it. That says everything. To any corrupt HOA leaders out there who might be watching, think twice before trying to steal someone's rights. Sometimes the quietest person on the street holds the greatest power to spark change. Today, a new sign stands proudly at our community entrance. Thompson Rodriguez Marina Group, a community development, building communities, not just marinas. That's our legacy, and I couldn't be more proud. As the sun sets and a gentle breeze ripples across the lake, I breathe deeply, finally feeling that long-awaited peace. The sounds of children playing echo in the distance. This is what we fought for. This is home. And the truth is that this is only the beginning. I can't wait to see what we all create next, because sometimes, the quietest voices really do bring the loudest change. And thank you for staying with us here at Anadrama Nest. Be sure to stay connected, because what's coming next, a broken bar might just change everything.